The great hall of the alien palace was filled with light. Crystals on the ceiling glowed with soft blue fire, casting shadows that seemed alive. Nobles in shining robes whispered among themselves, their eyes fixed on the tall throne where the princess sat. Tonight was not like other nights. Tonight, a guest unlike any other had been invited inside the sacred walls. The princess sat still, her golden eyes calm, but inside her heart pounded like a storm. She had prepared for this moment for years, yet she could not stop the trembling in her hands. She hid them by gripping the edges of her throne. Her face showed only calm strength, but her soul was restless. She could feel the weight of every stare in the room. The guards moved aside, and the guest entered. He was human. His presence was like a wave crashing against a fragile shore. The nobles gasped in quiet anger, for a human was not worthy of such honor in their eyes. Yet the princess could not look away. Her breath caught the moment she saw him. He was older now. His shoulders carried the burden of battles long past. Scars lined his face, telling stories that no song had ever sung. His hair had lost its youth, touched with silver at the edges. His eyes, however, were the same. They were steady, kind, and filled with strength. She remembered those eyes. She had seen them before, long ago, on a night of fire and terror. The princess leaned forward. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Memories poured through her mind, memories she had carried since childhood. She was small then, helpless, trapped under stone and flame. The world had seemed ready to end. Yet a human soldier had lifted her into his arms. He had shielded her from the storm. He had whispered to her, telling her to live, telling her to grow strong. That night had shaped her life. That night had given her courage. And now, after so many years, that man stood before her. The nobles did not understand. To them, he was nothing. They saw a foreigner from a weaker world. Their words carried disgust, soft enough to be hidden yet sharp enough to wound. They asked why such a being was allowed to walk among them. They wondered what trick or favor had brought him into the heart of their empire. But the princess ignored them. Her eyes never left his face. She studied every detail, as if she could confirm that this was truly him. Her voice echoed in her own mind, whispering his image, his voice, the memory of his arms carrying her away from death. She had waited for this. She had dreamed of this. The human soldier bowed before the throne. His head remained lowered. He did not dare to meet her gaze. His voice was steady when he spoke, but his words were simple. He thanked the court for their welcome. He claimed no honor. He came only because duty had called him back to this place. The princess clenched her hands tighter. She wanted to rise, to cry out, to ask if he remembered her. Yet her body froze. The court was watching. Her people expected silence, dignity, distance. But inside her chest, her heart was not silent. It screamed with longing. The silence grew heavy. Every noble waited for her judgment. Should the human be welcomed, or should he be cast out? The weight of tradition pressed against her shoulders. Yet she could not forget. She could not erase the truth of her childhood. The princess's eyes softened. Her voice came at last steady and calm, yet filled with hidden emotion. She welcomed the guest with the respect of her crown. She thanked him for his service in distant wars. The court murmured in confusion. Some looked in anger, others in disbelief. The human raised his head for a moment. Their eyes met. For the first time in years, the princess felt like a child again. That same warmth returned, the same light that had carried her through fear. His eyes showed no pride, only humility. Yet she saw the shadow of memory in them. He knew. He remembered. The hall grew louder with whispers. The princess lifted her hand, and silence returned. She leaned back against her throne, her heart pounding louder than the drums of war. She had found him at last. The man who had saved her life, the man who had shaped her path, was here. And the court had no idea of the storm about to rise. Inside her, a vow began to form. She would not let this chance slip away. The world might not understand. Her people might resist. But she would not remain silent forever. For tonight was only the beginning. The forgotten savior had returned, and his presence would change everything. The princess could not sleep that night. The echoes of the great hall still lingered in her ears. She sat alone in her chambers, staring at the charm that hung from a thin chain around her neck. It was small, plain, and weathered by time. Yet it was her most precious treasure. It was the only proof of that night when a human soldier had given her life back. She closed her eyes, and the memory returned with painful clarity. She was a child then, no more than 10 years old, lost in fire and chaos. The sky had been torn apart by falling ships, and her people screamed as buildings crumbled. She remembered the heat on her skin, the choking smoke, the sound of stone crashing around her. She had been trapped, pinned beneath heavy rubble, too weak to free herself. Her voice had been small, broken, barely a whisper. No one had come. No one but him. Through the flames, a figure appeared. A human soldier, his armor scorched, his body bloodied, yet his steps were steady. He had run into danger when others had fled. His eyes searched the ruins, desperate and sharp, until they found hers. She remembered the way he lifted the stone from her tiny frame, his strength fueled not by power but by will. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the building groaned above them. His voice was calm, though his body shook with exhaustion. "You are safe now. Hold on. Do not be afraid." Those words were simple, yet they carried the weight of life itself. She had clung to his chest, her tears soaking into his torn uniform. He shielded her with his body as more debris fell, covering her with his arms, willing himself to stand even as the world collapsed around them. When she thought all hope was lost, he had spoken again. "Live, little one. Grow strong. Never let fear own you." The fire roared, but his voice cut through it like light through shadow. He had given her a reason to breathe, a reason to fight for tomorrow. That night, in the heart of terror, her courage had been born from his strength. As he carried her out of the ruins, he placed something small in her trembling hand. A charm, no more than a token from his world, scratched and simple. "For you," he said softly. "So you will remember that you were never alone." Then, before she could speak, before she could even ask his name, he was gone. The armies clashed, the flames were extinguished, and the world moved on. But she had never forgotten. She had grown into a princess, bound by duty, trained in grace, feared by her enemies. Yet inside her heart, she was still the child who had once clung to a human's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The memory shaped her. When she faced challenges, she remembered his words. When she was afraid, she held the charm. When loneliness struck, she thought of his eyes. Now, years later, he had walked into her palace as if fate itself had returned him. He was older, scarred, yet the same man who had carried her through the night of fire. The princess opened her eyes and held the charm tightly. Her pulse quickened. Could he remember her? Or had she been only one of many he had saved? Did he know that his words had carved her destiny? Her mind swirled with questions. She had spent years searching for the identity of her rescuer. All she had discovered was fragments of rumor, whispers of a soldier who had survived battles no man should survive. She had followed every lead, but none had ever led her to him. Until now. She rose from her chair and walked to the balcony. The night sky stretched wide, filled with stars that glowed like silver tears. She thought of him out there, years ago, fighting wars on foreign worlds, carrying scars for battles no one remembered. And yet he had returned. She whispered to the stars, her voice soft but unyielding. "I will not let this chance slip away. Not again." In the quiet darkness, the weight of her secret pressed heavy on her chest. No one in the palace knew the truth. No one knew that their proud princess carried the memory of a human as her most sacred treasure. No one knew that the strength of their ruler was born from a single night when she had been saved by someone they considered lesser. Her heart ached with both longing and fear. If the court learned the truth, they would call her weak. They would call her unfit to rule. But her soul whispered another truth. That night had not made her weak. It had made her strong. stronger than any of them could ever understand. She gripped the charm once more. Her lips curved into a faint smile, touched with sadness and hope. The stolen night of the past had returned to her. And with it, the man who had given her life. What would she say when the moment came? What would he feel if he remembered her? The answers would come soon. But one thing was certain. The story of the princess and her forgotten savior was not finished. It was only beginning. The next morning the throne room was full once more. Nobles and generals filled the chamber, their voices buzzing like a restless swarm. The air was heavy with tension, and every glance turned toward the human guest who stood quietly near the edge of the hall. His presence was like a stone dropped into still water, sending waves of unease through the room. The princess entered with calm grace, her long gown flowing behind her. She carried herself as royalty should, but her mind was restless. She had not slept. The memory of his face haunted her through the night. Now, under the watchful eyes of her people, she had to act as ruler, not as the child who once clung to his chest. Whispers rose again as she took her throne. "Why is a human allowed to stand in this sacred place?" one noble hissed to another. "He should kneel outside the gates, not stand in the Hall of Kings," another muttered. "His kind are weak. His kind are servants," came a third voice. Their words cut the air like knives, but the human did not react. He stood still, his eyes lowered, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked like a soldier who had endured such scorn 1,000 times before. He did not demand respect, nor did he seek their approval. The princess watched him closely. She knew what they did not. To them he was an intruder, but to her he was the man who had once saved her very life. The weight of that truth pressed heavily on her chest. The High General stepped forward. His voice was sharp, filled with pride. "Your Highness, I must protest. Why do you grant this human such honor? He is no ally of our crown. He is no noble. He is nothing." The chamber stirred with agreement. The voices grew louder, rising in a wave of anger. The princess lifted her hand, and silence fell instantly. Her golden eyes swept across the hall, and no one dared to meet her gaze. Her heart beat faster. This was the moment. Should she reveal the truth? Should she let the court know that this man was not nothing, but everything? Her lips parted, but she hesitated. The storm in her chest clashed with the crown on her head. She could not yet speak the secret. Not here, not now. But she could not allow their insults to go unanswered. "He stands here," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Because I willed it. He is not your concern. He is under my protection." Gasps echoed. The nobles stiffened. Protection was not a word used lightly. It was a shield, a declaration of worth. For a princess to grant such words to a human was more than unusual. It was scandalous. The human soldier's eyes flickered upward, just for a moment. Their gazes met. In his eyes she saw surprise, but also something deeper. A quiet recognition, as though he too felt the invisible thread that bound them. The court broke into murmurs again. Some were furious, some bewildered. The princess ignored them. She rose from her throne and descended the steps slowly, her gown trailing like a river of light. Each step echoed in the silent hall until she stood before him. The soldier bowed deeply, refusing to meet her eyes. His voice was low when he spoke. "I did not come seeking honor, princess. I came because duty called me here. If my presence offends your court, I will leave." His words pierced her heart. He spoke as if he truly believed he was unworthy. He spoke as if her people's scorn was natural and expected. Her hand trembled at her side. She wanted to reach out, to lift his chin, to force him to look at her. She wanted to tell him that he was not nothing. That he was the reason she was alive. That he was the reason she had become who she was. But her tongue was bound by silence. The time was not yet right. Instead, she turned to the court. Her voice rang clear. "He will not leave. He has fought battles far from here. He has bled for causes not his own. His scars are proof of his strength. If you call him weak, Then you call me blind, and I am not blind. The chamber fell silent. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. No one dared to answer. The princess looked back at him, her heart tightening. She could see the question in his eyes, even though he did not speak it. Did she remember him? Did she know? Her lips curved into the faintest smile, just enough for him to see. A secret smile, meant only for him. The court was in shock. Their world had shifted in a single moment. The princess had spoken, and her words carried power. They could not understand why she stood beside a human. But she understood. And so did he. The storm was only beginning. The humans stood in the great hall long after the court had been dismissed. The nobles left in silence, their faces stiff with anger, but none dared to speak against the princess again. The vast chamber emptied until only guards remained at their posts, their eyes sharp but their tongues held. The soldier's shoulders felt heavy. He had faced the stares of kings and queens before, yet here it cut deeper. He had grown used to being unwanted. His kind was always the last to be trusted, always the first to be blamed. But this time it was harder to bear, because her eyes were on him. He kept his gaze low, fighting the urge to look at her. He did not deserve her attention. He told himself that she was a princess, a ruler of worlds, while he was nothing more than a scarred fighter who had survived too many wars. The princess moved down from her throne and stood before him once more. Her golden eyes searched his face, waiting for him to speak, but he remained silent. She could feel the distance he tried to place between them. She could feel the weight pressing down on him, a burden unseen by others but clear to her. "Tell me," she said softly, "what battles have left you so marked? What pain do you carry?" His jaw tightened. For a moment he said nothing, but her voice had reached a place he had kept hidden. Slowly, his words began to spill, rough and unpolished, but true. "I fought on worlds that are now dust. I carried brothers who never opened their eyes again. I watched children cry over graves that should never have been dug. I survived where others did not. And every time I returned, I was told it was not enough. That humans are weak. That our victories mean nothing." He raised his head at last, his eyes shadowed by grief. "So forgive me, princess, if I cannot stand tall in your presence. Forgive me if I do not deserve the honor you gave me today." The princess's heart clenched at his words. She could see the sorrow carved into his face, the sorrow of a man who had lived too long with ghosts. She wanted to tell him that he was wrong, that he had already given her more than he knew. But the secret still sat on her tongue unspoken. Instead, she stepped closer. "You believe you are unworthy," she said. "Yet I see no weakness. I see a man who has endured, and that endurance is greater than any crown." Her voice was firm, but her eyes softened with something more. Something she could not yet admit. The soldier lowered his gaze again, unable to accept her words. But he felt a warmth stir within him. He had been praised by generals, decorated by leaders, yet no words had ever touched him as deeply as hers. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint hum of the crystal lights above. It was not a cold silence, but one heavy with unspoken truth. He wanted to ask her why she defended him. He wanted to ask if she remembered the night long ago. But fear held him still. If she did not remember, if he spoke and she denied it, the wound would be too great. The princess turned away slightly, her hand brushing against the chain around her neck. The charm lay hidden beneath her gown, pressing gently against her skin. She wanted to show it to him, to prove that she had never forgotten. Yet her heart whispered patience. The time would come, but not yet. "Rest tonight," she said finally, her voice carrying both command and care. "You will remain here under my protection. Let no one tell you otherwise." He bowed again, though this time it was slower, more thoughtful. Her words had given him something he had not felt in years. A place where he did not have to fight, at least for a moment. As he turned to leave the hall, the weight on his back did not vanish, but it felt lighter. He carried scars that would never fade, memories that would never heal, yet tonight something had shifted. The princess watched him go, her chest tightening with every step he took away from her. She longed to call out, to speak the truth, to tell him that he was not only her guest but her savior, her memory, her heart. But the hall was not the place. Not yet. When the doors closed behind him, she let out a breath she had held too long. Her hand pressed against the charm once more, and her eyes glistened. The human bore the burden of the past, but so did she. His wounds were on his skin, hers were hidden in silence. Together they carried the same night, the same fire, the same memory that bound them. And sooner or later that memory would rise into the light. The night was quiet inside the palace. Silver light from the twin moons streamed through tall windows, filling the halls with a soft glow. Most of the court had retired, their voices silenced at last, but one chamber still held the weight of restless thoughts. The princess stood at her mirror, her golden eyes fixed on the reflection that stared back. She was dressed in her royal gown, yet she felt none of its strength. Tonight she was not the ruler of an empire. Tonight she was only the child who had once been carried through fire in the arms of a human. Her hand moved slowly to her neck. She pulled free the thin chain she had hidden for years. The charm dangled in the light, small and plain, but to her it was more precious than any jewel. She held it tightly, feeling its worn edges press into her palm. A knock came at the door. Her heart skipped. She whispered for the visitor to enter, and the door opened. The human soldier stepped inside. His armor was gone, replaced by simple clothes offered to him by the palace servants. He looked less like a warrior and more like a weary man. Yet his presence filled the room with the same quiet strength she had felt years ago. He bowed, but she lifted her hand quickly. "No," she said softly. "Do not bow here. Not when it is only us." He straightened slowly, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Princess, why have you called me here?" Her breath caught. The words she had carried for so long pressed at the edge of her lips. She wanted to tell him everything, yet fear lingered. What if he had forgotten? What if the night that shaped her soul was only a faint shadow to him? Still, she could not remain silent. She stepped closer, her voice trembling yet steady. "There is something you must know. A truth I have kept hidden from all others." He tilted his head, waiting. His silence gave her courage. She opened her hand, revealing the charm. The small token glimmered in the moonlight. His eyes widened, and for the first time his calm mask broke. He recognized it. "This," she whispered, "was given to me by the man who saved my life as a child. In the ruins, when my world burned, he carried me from the flames. He shielded me with his own body. And before he left, he pressed this into my hand. He told me to live, to grow strong." Her voice faltered. Tears touched the corners of her eyes, though her smile was soft. "That man was you." Silence filled the chamber. The soldier's breath caught in his chest. His eyes, once lowered in shame, now locked on hers with a mixture of disbelief and memory. He took a step back, shaking his head as if the weight of her words was too much. His voice broke. He closed his eyes, and the images returned to him. The fire, the child, the promise he had made with blood on his lips. He remembered her small hands clinging to him. He remembered placing the charm in her palm, never expecting to see her again. He opened his eyes, and they were wet with sorrow and awe. "All these years, you remembered." Her smile trembled. "How could I forget? You were the reason I found courage. Every step I took as princess, every battle I faced, your voice guided me. I lived because you told me to." The soldier's hands shook as he reached toward the charm, but he stopped short, afraid to touch it, afraid to touch her. "I thought you were lost to time. I thought I was nothing more than a shadow in your past." "No," she whispered firmly. She stepped closer, closing the space between them. She placed the charm into his hand. "You were never a shadow. You were my light." The air grew thick with emotion. Neither moved for a long moment. The soldier stared at the charm, his hand trembling under the weight of what it meant. His scars, his burdens, all the years of silence, suddenly they had meaning. The princess's voice softened, filled with unspoken longing. I kept this secret because my people would never understand. They see you as nothing, yet you are everything. Without you, I would not be here. Without you, I would not be me." Her confession hung in the air, raw and powerful. For the first time since their reunion, he lifted his hand, not as a soldier, but as a man. His fingers brushed hers, a hesitant touch, but it carried the strength of all the years between them. Her heart raced, but she did not pull away. She let his touch linger, a bond forged in fire and kept in silence, now reborn in truth. The princess had revealed her secret. And in that moment, the distance between them began to fade. Yet outside her chamber, beyond the walls of her confession, the empire waited. Whispers grew sharper, enemies plotted in the shadows, and the storm of tomorrow gathered strength. But for tonight, she was not alone. Tonight, her secret belonged to both of them. The morning sun spilled through the high windows of the throne room, painting the marble floor with golden light. The court had gathered again, more restless than ever. Nobles stood in their jeweled robes, their whispers sharp and poisonous. Rumors had spread like wildfire through the palace. Some claimed the princess was hiding something. Others said she had gone too far by offering protection to a human. The air trembled with tension, every voice eager to hear her speak. At the center of the hall, the princess walked with steady grace. Her gown shimmered in the morning light, but her eyes were colder than steel. Behind her mask of calm, her heart thundered. She had carried her secret for too long. The time had come to break the silence. The human soldier stood once more at the edge of the court. He looked worn, yet unshaken. He expected rejection today. Perhaps exile. Perhaps worse. He had no illusions. He was ready to leave if it meant peace for her. But the princess had decided otherwise. She ascended her throne and let the hall settle. Her gaze swept across the nobles who awaited her command. The High General, bold as always, stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said with stiff pride, "this man does not belong here. He has no title, no blood, no right. End this shame. Cast him out." The chamber erupted with agreement. Voices rose in anger, echoing like thunder against the crystal walls. Yet in the center of that storm, the princess lifted her hand. Silence fell. Every noble froze as her golden eyes burned with fire. Her voice carried clear and strong. "You speak of shame. Yet you forget who stands before you. You see only a human. But I see the man who once gave me life when all was lost." The hall shook with gasps. Confusion rippled through the court. The soldier stiffened, his eyes widening in shock. The princess rose from her throne. Each step she took down the marble steps echoed like a drumbeat of fate. "Years ago, when our world burned, I was trapped beneath the ruins. Death was certain. Yet a human soldier carried me from the fire. He shielded me with his body. He gave me the courage to live. That man stands before you now." The chamber exploded in protest. Some shouted in disbelief. Others cried out in fury. To admit that a princess owed her life to a human was unthinkable. It shattered their pride, their traditions, their vision of power. But the princess was not finished. She lifted her hand again, silencing them once more. Her eyes were fierce, her voice unyielding. "You call him unworthy. You call him weak. But without him, I would not be here. Without him, your princess would be ash among the ruins. You owe him the life of your crown, the future of your empire. He is not nothing. He is my protector, and I name him as such before all of you." The hall froze. No one dared breathe. The soldier's heart pounded as her words struck him like fire. Protector. The word carried power in their culture. It was no casual honor. It was a title of sacred trust, a bond stronger than blood. The High General stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "Princess, you cannot! It defies every law, every custom. To raise a human above us is betrayal." The princess turned on him, her voice cutting like a blade. "Betrayal? You call it betrayal to honor the one who saved me? Then I will tell you what betrayal is. Betrayal is the coward who abandons a child to fire. Betrayal is the noble who hides behind walls while a stranger risks his life. If this is what you call loyalty, then I want none of it." Her words thundered through the hall. The nobles were speechless. The soldier stood frozen, unable to speak. His chest ached, his throat tight. He had lived a life of scorn, carrying scars and silence, never expecting more. And yet here she was, lifting him into the light before her people. The princess turned back to him. Her gaze softened, though her voice remained steady. "You are not forgotten. You will not be cast aside. From this day forward, you stand as my chosen protector. No law will deny it. No voice will silence it." He fell to one knee, overwhelmed. His hands trembled as he lowered his head, but not from shame. From gratitude, from awe, from a weight lifting he had carried too long. "My princess," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I am yours to serve until my last breath." The hall erupted in chaos. Some nobles shouted, others argued, but none could undo her words. The declaration had been made. The bond was sealed. The princess reached out, her hand brushing his shoulder. The touch was gentle, but it silenced the storm in his heart. For a moment, the noise of the court faded away. There was only her, and the truth between them. She had chosen him. And the empire would never be the same. The throne room roared with chaos. Nobles shouted, generals argued, and voices clashed like steel. The princess's declaration had struck them like thunder. A human, raised as her chosen protector, was more than scandal. It was a wound to their pride, a break in the walls of tradition that had stood for centuries. Yet in the middle of the storm, the princess stood tall, her golden eyes calm and unyielding. She did not flinch as anger filled the chamber. She let their voices rise until they drowned themselves in their own fury. Then she lifted her hand. Silence returned like a blade cutting through noise. Every noble turned to her, their faces twisted with disbelief. But none could look away. The human soldier still knelt at her feet. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of her words echoing in his soul. Never in his life had he expected such honor. He had carried burdens across countless battlefields, yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. The princess looked down at him. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder, steady and warm. "Rise," she said softly. He obeyed, standing with slow strength. For the first time, he allowed himself to meet her gaze without fear. In her eyes he saw no judgment. Only truth. Only the memory of a night when he had carried her from fire. Turning back to the court, the princess's voice rang clear. "You may resist. You may rage. But you will not undo what has been spoken. This man is mine to protect, and mine to honor. He saved my life when I was a child. He gave me the strength to rule when I had none. If you call him unworthy, then you call me unworthy as well." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The nobles were struck speechless. For a princess to tie her worth to a human was unthinkable. Yet her words carried the weight of truth. None could deny it. The High General stepped forward, his face red with fury. "You risk war, princess. Our allies will see this as weakness. Our enemies will laugh." She turned her gaze on him, cold as ice. "Let them laugh. Let them call it weakness. They will soon learn that the bond between human and crown is not weakness. It is strength." The soldier stood silently beside her, his fists clenched at his side. He had faced armies without trembling, but her words nearly broke him. No one had ever spoken for him like this. No one had ever lifted him above scorn and silence. The court descended again into argument, but their voices no longer mattered. The princess had spoken. Her declaration was law. The empire itself had shifted, and no protest could erase it. Later, when the hall emptied and the nobles retreated to their chambers, the princess remained. The human stayed at her side, uncertain if he should leave. She turned to him, her eyes soft now that the weight of the court was gone. "Do you understand what has been done today?" she asked quietly. He bowed his head. "You have placed yourself in danger. You have placed me in danger. They will not forgive this easily." Her lips curved into a faint smile. I do not care for their forgiveness. I care for truth. And the truth is that you gave me life when no one else could. You are not my burden, you are my strength. His chest tightened. The scars of years felt lighter, as though her words had lifted them from his soul. Slowly, he knelt again, not as a subject, but as a man bound by choice. My princess, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. If I am your protector, then let it be until my last breath. I will stand against your enemies. I will bear the hatred of your court. I will carry this bond, no matter the cost. She reached down, her fingers brushing his cheek. Her touch was gentle, yet it sent fire through his veins. And I will bear it with you. You are not alone anymore. You never were. For a moment, the world outside vanished. There were no nobles, no generals, no empire watching. There was only the princess and the soldier, bound by fire and memory, standing together at last. But beyond the palace walls, whispers had already spread. Enemies plotted in shadows. Allies questioned their loyalty. The declaration of the princess had not only shaken her court. It had shaken empires. The soldier knew the battles ahead would be fierce. The princess knew her crown would be tested like never before. Yet neither felt fear. For the bond they shared was not weakness. It was the spark of something greater, something that could change the fate of worlds. Together they stepped forward, side by side, into the storm that waited. The forgotten savior was no longer forgotten. And the princess was no longer alone.